Live from the TV30 studio, here is Jim Schneider.
Well, hi, welcome to inFocus. We're glad that you've joined us. Today has been a very special day for us at WVCY, and that is, it was 62 years ago today, the very first radio broadcast. It was just a half-hour program on a local station, WBON 107.7, a program that was called Sacred Stylings, but that was the very birth of our broadcast ministry. Bible clubs had been going on in the city of Milwaukee with Milwaukee Youth for Christ, and three teens approached their Bible club director, Vic Eliason, looking to have a radio broadcast, and they put together a sample program. They took it to various stations, about 3 FM in the city at that time, and asked for some airtime. They were turned down. They were discouraged. They went back to their office and prayed, God, if you want us to have a Christian radio program, you're going to have to make it happen. 5 days later, a man walked in. Would anybody like some free radio time? And Vic jumped up from behind his cubicle asking the question, who are you and where did you come from? And the man explained how he was moonlighting for a brand new FM station, WBON 107.7, doing sales and so forth. And they asked him to put together a sacred program of music and devotional thought. Well, anyways, he was a born-again believer, but not walking with the Lord, and he just felt cut to his heart he could not do this. He said, I've been driving up and down the streets of Milwaukee looking for somebody to give this airtime, some ministry, and I saw your sign on the window, Milwaukee Youth for Christ, and wanted to check out to see if you might be interested in airtime. The very spot where Mr. John Harold Clark offered that radio time is where these individuals had prayed just 5 days earlier. God, if you want us to have a Christian radio program, you're going to have to make it happen. Well, that eventually led to the purchase of 107.7, became WVCY, Wisconsin Voice of Christian Youth. But it all began 62 years ago. This evening was the very first radio broadcast that took place. So we say praise the Lord for his goodness. Also, that goodness continues because we are also now in our 40th year of television. This year of 2023, television started in January of 1983. And we've seen the hand of God at work in this ministry. Right now, there are 60 different broadcast outlets that are picking up BCY America that owns and operated both full power stations and translators, 35 full power stations, 25 translators, and just even going on the air earlier, just a couple months ago in New York City and also in Rapid City, South Dakota. So again, it is all part of God's continuing miracle. And we just rejoice in that. We also rejoice in our Days of Praise Share-a-thon that just wrapped up Thursday and Friday of this past week. And it was our best May Share-a-thon ever, with just over $621,000 committed in pledges here for the ministry of VCY. And again, we say, to God be the glory. Well, friends, tonight as we begin the inFocus program, are you aware that there are arguments that are going on, have already been heard in court to undo our abortion law, our abortion restriction law here in the state of Wisconsin, our 1849 law? Are you aware that it's being proposed that pharmacists here in our state have the right to prescribe contraception? Are you aware that there's been legislation introduced in Madison to elect our president by a national popular vote? And also, are you aware that there's a budget battle facing our state with some important votes coming up very soon? Well, we're going to unfold that and so much more with Julaine Appling, President of Wisconsin Family Council, back with us for a regular legislative update. Julaine, good evening.
Good evening and congratulations. I echo the to God be the glory.
Yeah.
Exciting. I think most of that story I've heard before, but it's always encouraging to hear it, Jim. So, yeah, great things have come from that little group of people praying there on that little spot waiting for God to answer. So.
2631 West State Street is where they had a small storefront office, and how God used the faith of these young people and their Bible club director, Vic Eliason, to bring about the birth of what we now know as BCY America.
Oh, absolutely. And I tell you, I can't imagine doing the work we're doing without Christian radio as partners. And you all are in my opinion, our best partner in that area. And we thank God for the opportunity to have our programs on VCY and to be a part of the TV work and ministry that you do. It's just
very much a team effort.
Great opportunity.
So, and with that, Julaine hosts a program called Home Front every Wednesday afternoon, Wisconsin Family Connection, Wisconsin Family Minute, that airs on WVCY radio and stations across the state of Wisconsin here for VCY as well. But good to have you back for our legislative update. And our legislators right now, they are pretty much engrossed in something known as the budget.
Well, so Wisconsin works on a 2-year legislative cycle. And we began earlier this year with the first year of it. And the first year of the 2-year cycle, the budget's the big deal. The law says we're supposed to have our new 2-year budget in place by June 30th. So they start early. In February, the governor introduces his executive budget. He gives it to him in the form of a bill. And then it goes to Joint Finance Committee, which is a very powerful committee. And they start slicing and dicing, and they hold public hearings. They held 4 around the state earlier this year, ended in late May. And now they're starting to hold, and they pull together then all the ideas from their other peers about what they want, because the Republicans have a majority, solid majority in the Assembly and the Senate. They basically are trashing what the governor gave them. They pulled out all the non-fiscal items, all the policy items. He had all kinds of stuff in there. Removing the words mother and father, and using gender-neutral language, and marijuana, all that was in there. That's all gone. So now that the Joint Finance Committee has done that, they've taken ideas from their peers. They're getting ready to introduce a substitute amendment. And in legislative work, when you do a substitute amendment, it replaces the original bill. So that substitute amendment that the Republicans are preparing will completely replace what Governor Evers gave. Now, Governor Evers came with a huge price tag. And I've heard that the Republicans are paring that down, and again, only putting in fiscal policy, but there's a lot in there. And I'll just say this. I think all of us as Christians should be concerned about a budget that the state is doing, because it's our money. The state doesn't have money if we, the taxpayers, don't give it to them. And so this is a budget reflects what? Priorities. So now we're looking at what the Republicans are saying will be their priorities on how they spend our collective tax money. So all of that, I anticipate a vote on this in the next few weeks, and then they'll send it to the governor. He'll take out his very powerful line item veto pen, probably do some judicious line item vetoing, send it back to the state legislature. And the Assembly doesn't have a veto-proof majority. Senate does right now. They've got a 22-11 majority in there. So that's veto-proof. So that's where we are on the budget.
Okay, now last time the governor decided just to go ahead and sign it, as was.
And take credit.
And take credit for it, right, right, even though it opposed everything he had proposed. But some believe that may have whisked him to re-election then, too, for that fiscal responsibility that he showed in that regard.
Tax cuts,
Yes. So I know some of the things that they've been talking about is like a flat tax. Do we know if that's going to be in this or not?
No, I don't think it's going to be in the budget. I think that they've already had a hearing on some proposals for how we change the tax brackets. I believe the flat tax proposal has already had a hearing. And the reason you aren't going to see, I don't think you're going to see that. Leadership in the two houses disagree on how we should handle tax cuts. And let's refresh everyone's memory about why we can even talk about tax cuts. Because we're sitting on something like a $7 billion surplus. So that's how much overtaxation they've had over the last year or so, and accumulated that. So the question is, how do we responsibly take care of that? Leave a rainy day fund, but also cut taxes so people aren't having to pay in as much. The flat tax looks to me like it's got some legs, like there's some support for it. But there was even talk from Senator Appling, who's the Senate president, about eliminating the income tax. That would not be unheard of. There are a number of states that have no income tax. Florida,
South Dakota,
Texas. And that's one of the reasons we keep losing people from Wisconsin to those states, not just the weather. It's also about protecting income. So those things have been bandied about. I don't know how serious the Assembly Speaker is about a flat tax. I think what he is more inclined to is more of a graduated slowdown of the tax brackets so that everybody gets some kind of cut, but the flat tax, and just so everybody understands, it wouldn't come in immediately. It would start going down in bracket type things until I think it's 2025. And by 2025, everyone would be taxed, regardless of income, at 3.25%. And, there's a process. So we'll see. I do think that they need to bring a reasoned, responsible, ethical solution to handling the surplus. Government does not need that kind of surplus.
That means they took too much money from us.
That's exactly right. And they need to figure out how to balance this. Evers had a plan for getting rid of that surplus. He was going to give it to everybody in the form of a new program, put more into education, put more into helping on welfare benefits and all the rest of that. And the money would be gone. But he was also proposing some kind of a tax cut, a much more modest one than what Republicans were talking about. His was very, as I recall, his was strictly middle class. So, and those lower tax brackets.
Well, there is going to be an executive session coming up where they're going to be voting on this substitute amendment, and they take it kind of piecemeal, it appears. So on Tuesday, that would be tomorrow at 11 a.m., they're going to be dealing with circuit courts, the Supreme Court, district attorneys, public defenders. And then we see coming up on Thursday, they'll be having another hearing and executive session dealing with ag, trade, and consumer protection, environmental, natural resources, and there will be other things yet to come.
Oh, yeah. This budget is huge. It's over 2,000, well, it's right at 2,000 pages. I haven't seen these, I haven't looked closely at the substitute amendment, but the way they have to do it, they have to include all the statutory references and everything. So they do these in little bite-sized pieces so that people can understand a little bit more. Just to clarify, in an executive session, there's no input from the public. The members of the Joint Finance Committee can talk about the issues. And I should point out, too, when the budget actually gets to the floor of the Senate and the Assembly, no amendments can be offered. It's a straight up, down vote. That's it. You can't, just the plain budget, substitute amendment as proposed.
Another big issue that's been part of this whole discussion is that of shared revenue with municipalities, counties, et cetera. And virtually it's at a point where there have been, Milwaukee saying, unless you do this, we're going to have to lose more police protection here in the state or in the city. Et cetera. I know that's a major aspect of this budget as well, what that formula is going to look like.
Well, it is, and I'm not privy to it really any more than what the discussion is going on, although I did hear somebody speak pretty knowledgeably about it in person here not too long ago, and someone who is intimately involved with this process. And it seems to me, obviously, Milwaukee is huge. Milwaukee, we're sitting here right now, our largest population center, our city that stands to have such an influence over how everything else goes around the state because it's so central to the population. And I think what the legislature is trying to do is to find a way for Milwaukee to help Milwaukee, to say, look, we'll give you some tools to work with, but we're not just going to dump millions of dollars into the Milwaukee coffers and not have a accountability plan, not have some restrictions on it. I know that some of the legislators that are here in Milwaukee are very unhappy with any strings. Who gives money away like that in a city where there has been very little accountability?
Right.
And so now there's economic crisis, and at least looming, where we have shortages on our police staff, where crime has escalated. Who gives money like that?
But there's a plan to increase the route of the trolley. Didn't you know that?
These are the things that really confound us, right?
Right.
It is, and people like us and others look in and say, "You're spending money on what?" And Madison's going through something similar. They're tearing up East Wash to put in some kind of a rail system. I don't know. But I know that Milwaukee really is the centerpiece of the shared revenue. But they are also looking for ways to give more money to all the other communities. And the number I've heard is 10% increase in the shared revenue. I think what they're trying to say is, look, we'll take some of that surplus. We're going to give it to you in shared revenue. But we're going to make sure that it's used in appropriate ways. A lot of in transportation and infrastructure and things like that. So that it just doesn't get just blown away and used inappropriately.
Yeah, or if there's been mismanagement of funds, such with the pension funds and other issues here too, there needs to be accountability.
Well, there does, and Milwaukee has been in the crosshairs on this for decades now, right? And it goes back to this pension thing, and that's what is really at the heart, I think, of a lot of this. To say, all right, you all, this is my opinion, okay? You built this thing, and you kind of made your bed, and now you don't like lying in it, and you want the state to come in and bail you out, and we're glad to help, but it's not going to be a giveaway. We're not just going to dump probably the equivalent of not just millions, but tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into Milwaukee.
Fortunately, in my opinion, Milwaukee County did something right here just recently this is an article from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. County rejects abortion travel funds. And it tells us Milwaukee County supervisors on Tuesday shot down a proposal to cover the travel cost of county employees for out-of-state abortion services. The Committee on Personnel voted 3-1 to reject the resolution to allocate $30,000 and mentioned supervisors Logsdon, Shea, and Staskunas voting in favor, and Supervisor Willie Johnson against this. And they're just saying that, hey, when we're asking the state for revenue here, that we need resources, we need to increase public safety, we should not then be offering abortion travel services for county employees.
Okay, so let's be realistic. The amount is pretty much inconsequential, $30,000 out of a multi-million, probably low billion-dollar budget. I don't know what's Milwaukee's budget, but big.
Yeah.
But it's symbolic. It's symbolic in two areas. Number one, the county should have never been paying for people that are employed by the county to go and get abortions. Think about how counterproductive this is right now. Killing the next generation of taxpayers, entrepreneurs,
Future workers,
you know, all of the people, students in our classrooms. It's so counterproductive. In addition, of course, to being incredibly morally reprehensible. And they also want to send the message, all right, we want money from the state government, so we're going to look like we're being fiscally responsible here, and we'll rein it in. I'm glad they did. I'm glad that there were three. Tony Staskunas, by the way, you know, he was a former state Democrat legislator. I'm glad he voted that way.
Let's hit another issue that's really big in the news right now. We know that the Dobbs decision that came out June 24th of last year took the abortion issue back to the states. Roe v. Wade is gone. Praise the Lord for that. It's something we've been praying for a long time. But in that, we see the battle heating up in many, many states across this country, some protecting life to a greater extent, and some that it's a free-for-all as to how long we will be willing to kill babies in the womb. In Wisconsin, though, we see our abortion law from 1849 that's being targeted by our governor, targeted by our attorney general, and others who want to see our 1849 law thrown out the window. And I believe the founders of our state and legislators were very wise in putting protections in for the most vulnerable right away. I mean, their first year as a state saying we're going to protect the preborn child. That's under attack right now. Tell us what's going on, because I know oral arguments happened just last Thursday they began.
Well, sure. And just,
or 2 weeks ago Thursday.
Yeah, so since June 24th of last year, Planned Parenthood that afternoon said, okay, we're done doing induced or surgical abortions. Okay, so I want our listeners and viewers to know that unfortunately there's still chemical abortions probably going on, because RU46 is available through the mail and places like that. But surgical and chemical abortions, surgical and induced abortions that get reported to the states have been done since then. So that 1849 law, that, as you just pointed out, is a protecting of life law. It was put in place by a duly elected legislature, as far as passed through there, and then signed into law by a duly elected governor. So it has merit. It has met all the legal qualifications to be a law. We don't throw out laws automatically because they're old. But that's part of what's going on here. I just want to throw out a figure here. From July 1 through December 31st of last year, because of that 1849 law being in place, we have saved over 3,000 babies in this state.
That's wonderful.
We were killing babies at the rate of over 600 babies a month in this state. And now, because Planned Parenthood isn't doing those abortions and affiliated here in Milwaukee isn't doing those abortions, we've saved over 3,000 women the trauma of abortion and saved those babies. So 4 days after the June 24th, on that Tuesday, Evers, at the behest, Call at the behest of Governor Evers, filed a lawsuit claiming that the 1849 law was unenforceable. It sat there. It literally sat there, Jim, for forever. They did a little bit of work on it. They said, okay, it was originally the defendants were Robin Voss as Speaker, Devin LeMahieu as Senate Majority Leader, and Chris Kapenga as Senate President. And they went and said, look, how do we figure into it? We didn't pass that law. It wasn't here, So the court allowed them to get out. So Call named 3 district attorneys to replace them: Sheboygan, Milwaukee County, and Dane County. Why? Because abortions had been taking place there prior to the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So they were now the defendants. But that's all that happened. I think they were waiting until after the April 4th election. When they won the April 4th election for the state Supreme Court, they said, okay, come August, because she doesn't get seated until August, we got a 4-3 liberal majority now, and now we'll move on it. So what's the first thing they do? Is schedule oral arguments. So I think it was 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago was National Day of Prayer.
Yep, May 4th.
On May 4th, the Dane County Circuit Court judge heard oral arguments. And basically what they heard was, well, this law is just too old. And oh, by the way, we have implicitly, and I hope everybody understands that word, implicitly revoked it by laws that were put in place after 1973, when the Supreme Court said abortion on demand was just fine wherever you were in this country. And so the restrictions and regulations that we put on abortion, he said, well, that overturned, by implication, the 1849 law. Mm-hmm. How does that work? Those laws, those restrictions and regulations were put in place to protect because of the Supreme Court ruling. Had nothing to do with our 1849 law. Right. All the years that I've been doing this, we have fought to keep that. It's called in the statutes. It's 940.04. So that's what the 1849 law is. We have fought to keep that. Jim, there were opportunities when there was a liberal governor and a liberal majority in both houses. They could have overturned it, revoked it. It didn't happen, and I'm still amazed it didn't. And so now those oral arguments have happened. There was very little defense. The best defense came from the Sheboygan district attorney, who all along has said he would enforce the 1849 ban, whereas John Chisholm and the district attorney there in Dane County both said, we're not going to do that. They didn't put up much of a defense at all. The district attorney there in Sheboygan did. And he basically said, I don't think AG Call has any standing to bring this. How has he been aggrieved, on this? So we'll see. The judge, as of the time you and I are talking, has not yet, 2 weeks later, has not yet issued a decision on that. So, but this is going to take a while. I'll tell you how long it at least will take. It will take until after Janet Protasewicz takes the oath of office to become the next state Supreme Court justice in August.
Julaine, this is preborn life in the womb, and here's a story that just came out from CBN May the 8th, and it's a story of, they're calling it a miracle here. Doctors, for the first time, are doing a brain surgery, the certain type of brain surgery, on a preborn child. I believe the child's about 30 weeks, and conducting this surgery, and then they induce labor a few weeks after, and baby's doing really well, but can't deny the humanity. This was not a blob of tissue that doctors went in to do brain surgery.
Well, no, it's not a blob of tissues. It's not a mass of cells. It's not the product of conception. It is a human baby. And Jim, if there's anything we've got to get better at doing as pro-life people, we have to start talking about the humanity of the unborn from the moment of conception on. Yeah. A unique human being, separate DNA from mother, dad, all of that. And you don't do brain surgery on a blob of tissue. Right. Or a mass of cells. And I read that article, and little baby, 4 pounds and certain, maybe 5 or 6 ounces, born at 34 weeks, doing well. Yes. Not even taking heart medicine. Oh, come on. These are wonderful things. And by the way, just thank you, Lord, for giving us the ability to discover what you had already planned technologically and medically to do these kinds of operations.
It's very amazing.
Yep.
The scripture says, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And we see that borne out. I mean, we're continuing to discover that all the time. Julaine Appling is with us tonight from Wisconsin Family Council. And there is one other issue here pertaining to a video that has just emerged of a podcaster. His name is Tim Pool. And he is in conversation about abortion with someone called Lance from the Seraphs, and it's a Democratic Socialist YouTube channel. And he evidently got caught up in the moment and couldn't remember his talking points and refers to the unborn child as an unborn child. So let's watch the video clip and we'll have your comment.
You believe that the moment after the child is outside of the birth canal,
Sure.
that they are now endowed with human rights.
Yes.
However, when they are inside of the mother, literally anything you do to them is acceptable because they're inside of the mother.
Oh, no, I don't think anything is acceptable, but I think the mother should still have the choice, ultimate authority over what happens to her body.
But there's a child inside of her body.
Hold on.
And not
What
her.
about
Yes.
meth?
Like, should she be allowed to do meth?
Yeah.
I think if someone is doing meth while they're pregnant, that it is completely acceptable for something like, I don't know what the name of the service is in the United States.
Child services?
I guess
Child and child
DCFS
services?
would be.
Whoa,
yeah.
it's her body, though.
Yeah, it's her body.
If she wants to do meth, what's the big deal?
The big deal is that she's intentionally trying to kill a child.
Hold on there a minute.
Yeah, and I see where we're going.
I don't understand what you're saying. It's her body.
It's her body.
If she wants to do meth, what's the problem?
Well, first off, doing meth is illegal, period. Doesn't matter if you're doing it with a child or without a child.
Not in Oregon.
Very interesting there. Referred to the unborn child, caught himself all of a sudden, oh no, I said unborn child here.
Well, you know, every once in a while the truth has a funny way of coming out.
Yeah.
And it's that, but I think that is a wonderful clip, Jim, to show what happens when you hold that worldview. It is difficult to hold it consistently because it doesn't make sense
Right,
and it's
right.
not right.
Right.
Christian worldview, a biblical worldview, is consistent internally and it will hold, and no matter what we're dealing with. That's a mic drop moment, right?
Yes.
I hope we were pushing that out everywhere we can, because when you see somebody do that, and it's just a brilliant reminder, oh yeah, this is an unborn baby.
Right, right.
And oh, by the way, then he tries to cover, well, meth is illegal no matter. Well, that doesn't have a thing to do with it. But
Julaine, something else, and there's nothing in hard copy as of yet, but we understand that Robin Vos, the Speaker of the State Assembly, is looking at, well, caving in on the marijuana issue to some extent and bringing about medical marijuana.
this has been coming. So for the last several sessions, of course, the governor has put it into every budget cycle that he's had. But the Republicans have begun being warmer to this over the last 2 or 3 legislative sessions. Republicans have not had to wait for the Democrats to introduce bills for medical marijuana or for the regulation or standardization of what we're dealing with marijuana amongst the counties, because the Republicans have done it. Robin Vos may be moving in that direction. That would not surprise me. I haven't heard that kind of language specifically coming out of the Senate. Let's just remind everybody it takes 2 houses to get a piece of legislation through. So I don't know. I will say that I don't think this is a wise thing for us to do. I think you look around other states that have gone down this path. They started with medical, that grew to recreational. Jim, their whole goal is medical to move to recreational. Their goal is ultimately unfettered, totally available, grow it, use it, whatever.
Decriminalize all
Decriminalize all of it. And I've heard arguments from the Republicans for the last 3 years now about why we should do this and how we can, I ask them all the time, how are you going to restrict it? What kind of regulations are sufficient to make sure that a doctor is really saying this is the only thing that will control this person's pain? I don't know. Yeah. I think it's a very, very slippery slope, which always takes us further faster than we wanted to go.
It will take us further. And friends, just keep your ears open for this issue, because it likely is going to come around in some form or fashion. Julaine, elections never ends, it seems, and sure enough, there's just been announced for a new election coming up, because we saw Dan Knodel just giving up his assembly seat to go into the Wisconsin State Senate.
Well, we do seem to have just ongoing elections. So this will be an election in Assembly District 24, which is where Dan Knodel was from, and I think he was in Slinger or Germantown, one of the two, but right in that area, northeast of Milwaukee area. So the governor just
Northwest, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Menominee Falls.
Geographically challenged, apparently, with,
Yeah.
with that portion of the state. But the governor said, all right, so here's the dates. It is June, make sure I get the right ones here, July 18th for the general. So if there is a primary, then it would be on June 20th. They're doing signature collections right now, because that still has to happen. You got to get signatures to get on the ballot. And those have to come in by the 23rd of this month. Today's 15th, so a week from tomorrow. They have to be submitted to the Wisconsin Elections Commission, all those signatures verified, and that will determine whether we have a primary. So the people up in 8024, I'm sorry, but our promise to you that we would have no more elections this year in Wisconsin, it's going to happen.
But there's a lot of rhetoric going on because the primaries, presidential primaries, are already starting, early in 2024, and then here we just saw, since you were last on the program, here's Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin announcing she's going to be running for election. And right after she announced, here comes the press release from the LGBTQ plus Victory Fund endorsing her for the U.S. Senate.
Well, that is so expected. Mm-hmm. Tammy Baldwin is an openly homosexual woman. She served in our state legislature for years. It was not a secret. She was open about it. And when she got elected to the U.S. Senate, she was not quiet about that. I think she actually served in the House first and came out of the House and ran for Senate. And she leads the LGBTQ caucus with Mark Pocan, the openly homosexual member of Congress from Wisconsin over in the 1st Congressional District. Mark also came out of our state legislature. And so the LGBTQ groups are going to come out and support her. There's a main reason why this is all happening right now. Because if you announce early, you can start raising money. And these elections are getting more and more expensive. So she gets the imprimatur of the LGBT groups, and they will start funding her as well. It won't just be in name only. It'll be with money behind it.
We are soon going to be going into so-called Pride Month, and we know that we will likely see things at a faster pace than ever before and more intense with corporations, government, et cetera, getting engaged. But there's also something going on in Madison. Many people may not know that there is a Proud Theater, and they're actually having something called Quarantine. It's a dramatic presentation, understand, on the opening up May 25th, just 10 days from now, in Madison, and we are just going to be seeing a plethora of things going on to promote LGBT.
Well, we will, and they call it Pride Month. It goes back to Harvey Milk days and what happened with the Stonewall massacre is what they call it. Wasn't a massacre, but governor's going to put that pride flag over the state capitol. I'll just guarantee you, he's going to issue a proclamation. The thing that disturbs me about what you just talked about is it's geared for youth.
Yes.
It is sponsored by an organization that goes after the youth. They try to get them in there, and they appeal to their creative, spirits and their youthful exuberance, and they hook them on this kind of thing and give them an outlet for it. To me, and it's so they have a right to do this. They do. I understand in America we have that right, but they're preying on our youth. And look who sponsors it.
Trinity Lutheran Church, right down here in the corner, is one of the sponsors.
The LCA, Lutheran Church.
Mm-hmm. And then also is all of us, and people have been seeing spots for this. This is a program where they're trying to get people all around the state to submit a sample of their DNA, supposedly for health research and so forth. But beware.
Well, we should beware. And I would hope viewers would start looking at things like this to make sure they're looking at who sponsors these kinds of things. They're not innocuous. It's not just a night or two out. This is a political, cultural statement and literally living color.
Julaine, you were on with us. You've been coming on a monthly basis. And since you were last with us on our April program, there were 290 separate pieces of legislation introduced into our state legislature. Assembly bills, sometimes Senate companions, sometimes Senate standalone bills, joint resolutions, etc. We're only going to scratch the surface on a few of those here this evening, but 290 pieces of legislation since last with us. And I'm going to have us begin with this bill here. It's Assembly Bill number 175, and this is something that would expand what they're calling or they're saying clarify what is medical necessity for abortions and making exceptions for rape and incest.
Well, we knew this bill was coming. We had hoped that it wouldn't, but we knew it was probably impossible to stop it. But I want to note something important here, Jim. This bill to date, and this was originally introduced on April 14th, following a press conference, there still is no Senate bill introduced. That is very telling. So this bill, this is coming out of the Assembly. The Speaker is very much behind this. In fact, I believe if you look at this bill, I believe he might actually be on this bill. Nope, doesn't look like it. But yes, he is. He's listed as a co-sponsor. This is coming out of the belief, following through what Robin Boss said months ago, that he believes we should have rape and incest exceptions. Rape and incest are horrific. There's no doubt about it. Sexual assault is horrible for anybody, and nobody's going to minimize that. But the baby is the innocent victim in this, and how a baby is conceived does not diminish the value, the inherent dignity of that baby. That's still a baby that bears the image of God. And so,
well, if a homeowner has been robbed, you don't kill the homeowner.
Well, no. And so we need to talk about these things. We need to explain these things. And by the way, there's no police report required in this bill. At a minimum, there should be a requirement that if a woman's going to claim rape or incest to get an abortion under the current 1849 law, if this were to become law, she should at least have to show a police report. This opens a door wide open for a woman to come into Planned Parenthood and say, "I've been raped. I've been sexually assaulted by whatever." So the other thing it does is right now the current 1849 law has an exception for the life of the mother, but it's not clarified. And there is some language in here that attempts to clarify that in a much narrower way than what we usually have it. So it's not just wide open. I think there might be other bills coming that are also going to try to do that. That might be an improvement over this. Don't have the language yet, just hearing rumors. But this bill, I think we'll have a hearing in the Assembly. But within minutes of that press conference, okay, the governor came out and said, AB 175, I'll veto it. It doesn't go far enough. Within hours, that was within minutes actually of the press conference, within hours, Devin LeMahieu, the Senate Majority Leader, Republican, came out and said, it's dead on arrival over here, gang. So it's very interesting. This is, I don't know, notice they held it until after the Supreme Court election, which everybody said, well, if you're going to do it, why don't you do it before? I can't speak for the timing and the intent, but that's what this does. So let's be clear. There are, if you look at this, I don't believe there are any Democrats on here. They are all Republicans who are co-sponsors in the Senate and the Assembly. What they're saying is, we want to be the party that brings abortion back to Wisconsin.
My. So, Julaine, what you're saying, even if they did have that police report on here, you still would not be in favor of this legislation?
Oh, no. No, I would not be in favor of it. I don't think it's necessary. I think that every human life has inherent value, dignity, and worth. And no, let's support the women. Let's figure out how to support these women. So, no.
That's Assembly Bill 175, by the way, and it's been introduced. No action on it as of this point. There is also some companion pieces of legislation. It's Assembly Bill 176. I also have its companion, Senate Bill 211, that would give pharmacists the ability to prescribe contraceptives.
Well, this is not a new bill. I believe this is the fourth time that the Republicans, let me repeat that, the Republicans have introduced this bill. Joel Kitchens is the Assembly author, and Mary Felskowski, now a senator, is the Senate author. This bill right now sets up something that's unprecedented. In Wisconsin right now, pharmacists cannot write a prescription for anything, zero. But the Republicans want all pharmacists in this state to be able to write a prescription for certain contraceptive drugs and devices. There's so much, this is the fourth time we've had this bill, but there's so much wrong with this bill. When Kitchens, they'll have a public hearing, and when Kitchens gets up as the author to give his support for it, he's going to say, this bill, AB 176, will stop generational poverty. No, it won't.
No.
It will not stop generational poverty. If there's a silver bullet to stop generational poverty, it doesn't begin with pharmacists doing this. It begins with marriage, return to God's plan for humankind. And so one other thing, Jim, I want to point out real quickly in here. I don't know of any time that I have heard a man going to get a prescription for contraception. But this bill uses the word person throughout. It never uses the word woman. So what we have is a tip of the hat to the transgender craze. And secondly, we've opened the door wide open for pimps and johns to come in, talk to a pharmacist, get a prescription, and go and give it to the young girl that he's been using in prostitution, who he does not want to get pregnant. The bill is horrible.
Yeah.
It doesn't deserve the attention it's going to get.
Another bill introduced on the 20th of April, Assembly Bill number 218, and this also would eliminate what they say certain abortion prohibitions.
Well, basically, this takes the 1849 law out, and it wipes out that and some other regulations and restrictions that we put on it. This is all Democrats on this bill. This bill will not get a public hearing. It will not go anywhere. But it's the shot across the bow, Jim. They're saying if we had control, this is what would happen. We wouldn't be waiting for the Supreme Court. We just do it statutorily.
Here's another bill introduced. This was May 8th, just days ago. 1 week ago, the Assembly Bill number 247, and this prohibits the use of public employees and public property for activities related to abortion.
And this comes out of a situation that we've had for years in Madison, where the UW Medical School has had a cozy little relationship with Planned Parenthood of Madison, where they have done surgical abortions over the years, and the med students would come over to Planned Parenthood and get trained in abortions, and this closes those loopholes and across the board. So it's a redraft with a little bit of a twist over legislation we've seen before on that issue.
Let's get to another couple a pair of bills. Assembly Bill 246, Senate Bill 252, dealing with human growth and development committees.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. When our organization led the coalition of groups after the Democrats had control of the state legislature for a while, and they had changed from a pretty conservative view of human growth and development to a liberal comprehensive sex approach, our organization led a conservative coalition under Walker administration to get it back. And we said, and maybe people don't know this, Jim, but it's important that we do. No school district in Wisconsin has to have sex ed, human growth and development. It's voluntary. But the law says if you have one, you have to have a committee. That's an advisory committee to the school board. And we changed, back in 2011, we changed the composition of it. I'd been on a school board in Watertown. I'd seen the composition up close and personal. It was filled with school personnel. So we limited the number of school-related people who could be on it. This bill actually removes school people from it. Pretty much it just takes them right out of the picture. And it changes the percentages a little bit. So I think this bill is probably pretty well intentioned to try to remove an influence that sometimes can become very heavy-handed in these kinds of advisory committees.
I'm just going to mention one last pair of bills here because the clock is going faster than I am here this evening. This is a couple of bills, and we mentioned we were going to talk about this tonight as well. Assembly Bill 156 has a Senate companion, Senate Bill 144, and this would actually bring about the election of a president and vice president by a national popular vote. Tell us about this.
And this is not new either. Kelda Helen Royce, when she was in the Assembly, now in the Senate, you know, she's the main sponsor of this in the Senate. She introduced this 10 years ago, maybe 12 or 15 years ago. What this would do is it would say, okay, you can have your vote as a state, but your popular vote, your electoral votes that come out of your popular vote, do not go to the candidate who won your state election. They go to the candidate who wins the national popular vote. So in 2016, let's just take that as an example. Trump won here, but Hillary Clinton won the national popular vote. So our 10 electoral votes would not have gone to Donald Trump. They would have gone to Hillary Clinton.
Under this proposal.
Under this proposal. So what they have to do is get enough states to pass this to equal the 270 electoral votes that are required for a presidential candidate to win the presidency. So right now there's, I think, 15 states. They're not. They've got a little ways to go. I certainly, personally, I don't want to see us give them our 10 votes. I don't see this going anywhere under the current configuration of our state legislature. It's not going to get a hearing, but it again is a shot across the bow. This is what they want. I have recently read one article by a conservative who said, I'm not sure that's a bad idea. And I wasn't sure. I thought his logic was completely right, but there are apparently a few conservatives are beginning to say, maybe this isn't such a bad idea.
Julaine Appling with us here tonight. We've got more, but friends, we'd like to give you opportunity to quickly ask a question or to make a comment on any of these topics that we've discussed here this evening. Our phone number here to InFocus is 414-935-3030. 414-935-3030. Toll free, it's 800-733-8830. That's 1-800-733-8830. I would encourage you just call sooner than later because we've got not too many minutes left in our program here. If you want to text in your question tonight as well, you may do so. Send us your first name, the location, city that you're doing it from. Text it to 414-439-3585. That's 414-439-3585. And we'll take your calls here tonight. Julaine, so the big item right now is the budget issue. And are there other pieces of legislation we expect to advance over the summer? Will there be holding public hearings, floor sessions, et cetera?
Well, that's a good question, because usually what happens, Jim, is the legislature goes pretty hard between January of the first year of that 2-year cycle until the budget's passed. Once they get that budget done and the governor's done his veto thing and it's come back to the state legislature and they said, okay, we don't have the votes to overturn it, they'll go away for July and August. And we'll start seeing them come back really hitting things hard in September after Labor Day. And they'll go really quite furiously up through probably around Thanksgiving. They'll take a little break between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Might have some public hearings between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then they'll come back in January, and it will be a mad dash through the end of March, because this is a presidential election year coming up in 2024.
Right.
So they're going to want to get everybody out of there and out to their various districts to be able to campaign, because we'll elect all 99 state assembly reps, half of our state senate. We'll have a U.S. Senate race, Tammy Baldwin. And the fun just never stops here, Jim.
Yeah, not at all. So we've got a text from Kirk in Oak Creek. He said, of the 4,000 children in foster care, approximately 117,000 are waiting to be adopted. Are we walking the talk when so many await adoption?
Look, I am a firm believer in adoption for all kinds of reasons. I am adopted. And by the way, I could have been I could have been conceived as a result of rape or incest. So organizationally and personally, we are strong proponents of this. Let's be honest, adoption is expensive, whether it's domestic or international. I know that there are plans to start looking at how we can help with some financial things in the state. If people are Wisconsin residents trying to adopt Wisconsin-based babies, we're going to try to see some ways that they might get some financial breaks, because it is very expensive. The foster care system, I'd love to think that we could have kids adopted out of there regularly. And I would like to see Christians step into that arena. I think Christians whose family structures are solid and they say, oh, we could take a few more and foster them and then adopt them would be wonderful. I think our church in Pro-Life Month, in January, we had a special panel on that. We had a family up there who had done just that and had been foster parents and adopted out of that. It is important. And the tragedy of foster care, Jim, is when these kids age out of the system and they still have no forever family. So I hope we're beginning to walk the walk and the talk more than we have been. I don't think we as Christians get a free pass on that. Adoption, we're adopted, right? I mean, we're all adopted into the family of God because of Christ's finished work on the cross, right? So there's a beautiful model there. I think adoption is about grace, getting the best.
Are there not
possible.
waiting lists for adoption?
Well, yeah, there are. In fact, I was told about a year ago that the Christian adoption agencies in Wisconsin were, well, first of all, I think there are waiting lists for couples, but they don't always have, a lot of these couples want infants, and you don't have that in foster care. So a lot of these places, I don't think had the babies available. But let's real quickly talk about why that is. That's because of a suppressed birth rate. Our birth rate has been so low in Wisconsin for over 40, almost 50 years that...
we can't even sustain our population.
Well, of course we can. 2.1 babies per woman of childbearing age holds the population even. We've been at 1.8, 1.9 for nearly 50 years. And somebody wonders why we don't have workers? And we've got a high employment rate right now, right? I mean, very few people in this state are unemployed. And we don't have workers. We've depleted the workforce.
Yeah.
And just to talk about it demographically, we have a whole band of counties in northern Wisconsin where there is a true demographic winter. More people are dying every year than babies are being born. How do you sustain that? You can't sustain that. You have no students in school. You have no workforce. You have no you're literally killing out your people.
Our phone number here tonight, 414-935-3030, 414-935-3030, toll free 800-733-8830. And to text in, send us your first name and the city you're texting from, 414-439-3585. This is coming from Shannon of Oak Creek. She says, on Thursday, I attended a city meeting called Milwaukee 2040. Milwaukee wants to create a 15-minute city with net zero emissions by 2040. Their goal is to increase the population of the 3rd Ward by 44,000. They want to knock down the Hone Bridge to gain land for the project. Julaine and Jim, do you have any recourse? Wisconsin Electric is closing the Oak Creek power plant in 2025. How will we support 44,000 new people with electricity? What can we do about this?
Wow. Well, citizens who live in that area and have any say in Milwaukee, city of Milwaukee governance need to begin speaking up. If they're holding these hearings, it's 2023 and their goal is 2040. It's not very many years, 17 years. And the citizens of Milwaukee who have a stake in this need to get to their elected officials.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be a downer here, but in order for some of this to change, the people who are sitting in the decision-making seats in Milwaukee have to change, because their worldview is cockeyed and they don't see clearly, they don't see plainly.
Friends, on this issue, similar issues we've covered many times on Crosstalk with people like Tom DeWeese at the American Policy Center and AmericanPolicy.org you can go to, and he's got a whole lot on sustainable development and even the UN's 2030 Agenda 21, etc. But it really is to get population into small areas, and as they're talking about the cutting back of electricity, we see the push that's going on for electric vehicles. We don't have enough charging stations, and then when power outages are happening, we see chaos happen in different states, and it is this seems to be on the course of several others to implode our system as we know it.
Well, and compound that with the push that has happened at the federal level to try to force communities to stop single-family dwellings. They do. They want to push everybody into these inner cities, central cities, if you will, and put them there in high rises. Nobody owns anything that's single family. It's all, multiple family dwellings. This is the mega state. This is the attempt to ultimately control everything we do.
Where you live, how you commute, what you buy at the store, what stores you can purchase at. It really is all about control.
It's forced obeisance, and it's forced compliance. And I mean, look, they're trying to do that on the transgender issue. They're trying to do that on the entirety of the LGBTQ thing. They're trying to say to us, we will make you. Look. Today, the public hearing opportunity window for Biden's new Title IX regulations closed. What are they trying to do on that? They're trying to say to everyone, you will comply, or we will have a financial penalty to pay. Some way we will make you pay.
Contacting city aldermen, county supervisors would be so important for this as well.
Absolutely.
And here, all this money was just spent, and all the big talk about lighting up the Hone Bridge, and we have different colored lights for different things at events that will take place, and now they're talking about bringing down the Hone, and that is something, friends, to really speak out to your local officials concerning this, and to really talk to your neighbors as well and get them to also reach out. Let me just quickly bring this up. We only have about a half a minute to deal with this, but there is Senate Bill number 264 here that's been introduced, Julaine, just May the 2nd, and this would prohibit, we know that there are hostile countries like Communist China buying up land across this country. This legislation would prohibit an adversary from another country coming and buying land here in our state.
Well, and it's sad that we have
agriculture and forestry.
Absolutely, it's sad we have to have this. But what you're describing is happening. They're buying up farmland. They're forcing our farmers out. So this bill isn't family farms to these mega farms that somebody else controls. And so what this bill is trying to do is say, hey, not in Wisconsin. We're not yielding any more of our land. But I want to point out that we tried to have a bill passed years ago that would make it so we didn't appeal to international law for our own court cases. We couldn't get that bill through.
Right. Well, friends, Wisconsin Family Council is keeping you informed on so many of these critical issues that affect marriage and life and liberty here in our state. You can reach out to them, wifamilycouncil.org. If you're not on their list, their contact list, folks, you need to get engaged. You got to stay informed of what's happening. As the prophet Hosea said, your theme verse, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. You may reach out to them by phone, 1-888-378-7395. Just give them a call, saying, I saw Julaine on TV, how can I get involved? Julaine, thank you for coming this month and every month here for the inFocus program.
It's my pleasure. I'm honored to do it, Jim. Thank you for the ministry.
Julaine Appling from Wisconsin Family Council. Keep them in your prayers, but folks, contact them, stay engaged. God bless you, folks. Thanks for joining us here tonight on inFocus. Good night.